So just defining some simple criteria for that. But I think the key is making it simple and not making it a checkbox exercise. So one of the things I always hated as a sales rep is, well, fill out this form, check all these boxes. No one ever reads it. No one ever does anything with the information. So it's like, what are the key items we want to track? What's the criteria? And let's enable that for the team. So if I'm going to tell somebody to fill out these items, it's not a giant laundry list full of things. It's the key things that are going to help move the deal forward, not something just to appease people who are looking to see if there's activity or something like that. So I think keeping it simple for the user and keeping the user in mind. So I know salespeople, I'm one of them, and it becomes an administrative exercise. And we all know how much time folks spend on that sort of stuff. So the more I can reduce that, the better. And that's going to set us up better for scale.
This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales ops onto the show to deconstruct the what, why, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, a revenue intelligence platform used to identify risk in the pipeline and score customer engagement, and is sponsored by the Global Sales Operations Association and the UK Revenue Operations Network. Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. Today we're joined by Sandy Robinson, who is the VP of Sales and Revenue Operations at Nymbus. Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Sandy, I see someone here with extensive both sales and then operations experience. What I would like to understand first is the time point at which you decided to move from sales or sales management into operations, like when that happened, and also why that happened.
That's a great question. So it happened when I was a regional sales manager, sales director, and I was managing a couple of regions and sales folks. And at the time I was trying to tell my story, manage territories, and relying on data from corporate, which, kind of the running joke was the things that you got from corporate weren't always reliable. So we wait for the third, fourth version of the spreadsheet to come out. So, I got really crafty with the system. We were on an old version of Microsoft CRM. I learned the reporting, was able to, kind of tell our story, manage up. And pretty soon sales leaders were asking me, can I get this report? Can you do this for me? And I had a really great mentor who eventually said, you're really great at this stuff. Have you heard of sales operations? And, it was fun. They said, we really need a sales ops leader and someone to, stand this up. And so I shifted into that role after, being in that at this particular organization, being in a sales leadership role for several years. And I've, been on that side of the fence ever since. I did run a few sales teams while putting sales ops together. So I was kind of doing both for some time. But I think it's really valuable having that experience, especially having carried a bag. I know what it's like, old school, knocking on doors, cold calling, filling out lead sheets and things like that. So it was kind of a natural transition, but I'm really passionate about it.
How crucial do you think it is for a sales ops or revenue ops person to have experience actually doing the selling?
I mean, personally, I have the experience, so I can't imagine doing it any other way, looking from the outside and understanding the business, like really understanding the pressure of quotas and making your weekly quota, your monthly quota, having to report up, having to have that pressure. I'm sure it can be done, but it really takes an understanding, I think, of just being in that mindset. Like that, they're the sales team, they're my customers, right? And so I really understand them and what they need and how to enable them. So I think if you don't have the experience, you really need to immerse yourself and understand the team and really understand their needs, which you need to do anyway because everybody's needs are different. But it gives you a leg up, in my opinion.
Totally agree. Just to confirm, so the transition from sales management to operations, that happened at the company called Kemper, right?
Correct. I was at Kemper and I was in a sales director role, and we had some shifts in the organization. As with any public company, there's lots of reorganizations and things like that. So there was a lot of change, and it happened at a time too where we were managing change and had to realign territories, bring two teams together, overlap, reps that came from different companies, and figure out what those geographies look like. So one of my first projects was really pulling two companies together and recreating territories, compensation plans, and everything like that, just right off the bat. So it was a great way to kind of dive in headfirst to the deep end.
Makes sense. And was that, so just to clarify, when you did move over into operations, was there an ops team there already, or did your work in the ops area make them think that, yes, actually, we need a sales ops function?
So it was kind of a combination. So there was a person that did provide reports and kind of serve as that function, but there wasn't anybody looking at it from a actual holistic sales operations function. We did have administrators that reported up to marketing. And so it was, just one of those, there was a knowledge that the function was covered, but it wasn't like a defined functional area.
Sure. And then I want to also touch upon your current role at Nymbus. Could you just give the listeners a sense of roughly how many sales reps and roughly how many people are in your sales/RevOps function?
So we've been scaling up. So we're around, if you include BDRs, sales engineers, RVPs, we're I think right around 25 now for our whole sales team. And then we're also scaling up our customer success team. So I started back in February, and I think there were 2 sales reps at that time and 5 BDRs. So we're growing fast. So everything that I'm doing right now is it's startup creating from not really having anything, but also creating for scale quickly. So while we're in startup mentality and we're trying to be flexible and create, things are going to change, but at the same time, everything that I'm doing, it's in the mindset of where we're going to be next year at this time, end of the year. We're hiring fast and growing fast. So we can't continue, we can't do things, that are, very manual. We have to set ourselves up for scale and automation.
Got it. What do you think has been the most impactful initiative or change that you've made since joining?
So I would say getting our lead process in place quickly. So we have a lot of excitement in the market with things that are going on. And just, one of the first things, we weren't even sure we were going to be on Salesforce when I was hired. So that was the first thing was, let's stand everything up in Salesforce. I know we can have tools connect together and, put things in place pretty quickly. So, and then the first order of business was getting the BDRs dialed in with a lead process and having it, come in from the web form, come into a queue and define our lead stages and, what, an MQL versus an SAL and everything like that. So that was really the first fast order of business. A quick win is just getting the team enabled. They were kind of working on spreadsheets that were getting emailed from marketing and, I don't know where the leads were going. So that was the first order of business. And then the second was getting the tools for the BDR team. So we put in, I selected Outreach and Gong to quickly get enabled. So we did that, and we're able to, get the coaching and calling and cadences and things like that set up fast.
Got it. And apart from scaling, is there anything else that you're looking at for the rest of 2021?
Compensation. So I'm currently doing it in a spreadsheet. I just brought on a tool that my admin is getting set up. So hopefully this is the last run. I'll be doing it manually in a spreadsheet. And so that'll be really great to get in place. It'll give them some nice report cards and quota tracking as well, rather than waiting for my PDF that I email each of them individually. And it's getting bigger and bigger that every month I do it. So, and I'm just scared to death I'm going to get it wrong and send the wrong person the wrong one. So that's like my immediate need to get in place now. And that'll really set us up, I think, for, having that also that, people want to know where they are. They don't want to wait for me to send the spreadsheet at the end of the month. They want to know how they're tracking. Hunters are motivated by this sort of thing, and as many dashboards as I can build in Salesforce, that's great. But they want to know how much they're getting paid. So it will connect Salesforce. It's going to pull from Salesforce, so it'll pull the opportunity data and everything like that. But we'll be, putting some other, manual data in terms of our, when our customers pay and things like that. So there's going to be multiple sources feeding into the tool.
Yeah, makes sense. Sounds like things are shaping up very nicely over there at Nymbus. Right now, we'll bring on my co-host, Alex, to dig a little bit deeper.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Sandy. That was really interesting to hear a bit about your journey, in particular what you're doing now at Nymbus. So I think starting from the back where you are now, I was really interested about the whole idea of building for scale. I think it's quite obvious. It's just an obvious buzzword to use, scale. In the startup culture, it's all about scale. I'm not saying you were doing that, but how do you then try and do something? How do you really make that sort of practical? And how do you balance the requirement to figure out a process that actually works before making sure it can scale?
Right. So depending on the process, I think, keeping things simple is what's most important. So my philosophy is create process first, then put it in a system, then iterate, modify it, change it, get user feedback, and then automate it from there. Right. So I think creating, identifying where we need a process, one of those processes is, an opportunity process, right? So when do you create an opportunity? So just defining some simple criteria for that. But I think the key is making it simple and not making it a checkbox exercise. So one of the things I always hated as a sales rep is, fill out this form, check all these boxes. No one ever reads it. No one ever does anything with the information. So it's like, what are the key items we want to track? What's the criteria? And let's enable that for the team. So if I'm going to tell somebody to fill out these items, it's not a giant laundry list full of things. It's the key things that are going to help move the deal forward. Not something just to appease, people who are looking to see if there's activity or something like that. So I think keeping it simple for the user and keeping the user in mind. So I know salespeople, I'm one of them. And it's like, it becomes an administrative exercise. And we all know how much time folks spend on that sort of stuff. So the more I can reduce that, the better. And that's going to set us up better for scale.
Fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, really, really helpful. And just really putting the bones on what a sort of iterative process is of building successful processes for scale. And then obviously the key is good simplicity, which can sometimes be easier said than done. But thanks, that was really helpful. The other thing I was just thinking about was when you mentioned at Kempo, two things. Is one, how essentially there was always people doing operations pieces in the revenue functions, but it wasn't a set department. And again, even though it's increasingly common, there will still be people where they're sort of building this out for the first time. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about your experience there and any sort of suggestions and recommendations you have around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be when you first start in a role like that, it's like, where do I start? So, just simple prioritization exercises. In that case, it was pretty simple because we had to combine the two businesses. So starting with territories and compensation was, something that was important. So, I think it's really just understanding the business, understanding the needs of the business, and then prioritizing it. And then getting buy-in with the leaders is always important. So, between finance and the sales leaders, the marketing leaders, anybody who's involved, and just making sure that, okay, we're aligned on priorities. It's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind and, be working on a lot of different tasks that aren't, moving the needle forward. So it's just knowing where to start and then diving into those areas, I think.
Great, thanks. And that was the other thing I wanted to pick up, which you talked to us. You're merging two businesses, and again, another, businesses scale often, to make through acquisitions. And I just wondered if you had, again, some thoughts to share from your experience of doing that, anything that you learned, sort of good practices or things to avoid.
I think just you can't forget the people factor. So, anytime that's happening, there's emotions and, people are, worried about their jobs and their new roles and, things like that. So I think it's just really understanding there's a balance of what's right for the business and, understanding the needs of the market and understanding, okay, how do we help the people through this transition, whatever the end result needs to be. So from a systematic perspective, obviously there are logistical things, like in this case, there were 2 CRM systems. So that was very challenging. So, and that was probably the thing that was the hardest. Was we had 2 old CRM systems. So what really needed to happen was going to Salesforce, but in a large public entity, that's years of decision making. So I'm really a root cause person, figure out the root cause and solve for that. But in that case, we really had to put some Band-Aids on it, because while I tried to solve for the root cause, that was going to be, 3 to 5 years of happening. They're actually doing it now, I heard, moving over. And that was an initiative I started years ago. And so we had to really understand how to make sense of the data, create dashboards in Tableau that pulled things together. So it was definitely challenging all around, between the people, really setting up territories and comp was kind of the easiest quick win. But it was really getting all the systems to talk together and getting 2 cultures to merge together and teams and managers to train each other. Training was also my responsibility, training, onboarding, enablement. So we did a lot of, teaching each other and cross-training and things like that. So it was definitely a fun time, but it's, again, I just really think it's change management 101. How do you deal with it? So there's people and there's logistics.
Great, thanks. Really, really helpful. Just sort of thinking about how that might look. I think one final question, and which is going to be something like anything that you think is going to be like the kind of the future of RevOps, anything quite exciting you see happening there, or any. We had a previous guest who told us after we stopped the recording, he said, apart from enjoying it, she said, I didn't even get to any of my hot takes. And we're like, I should have asked that. And so I just think, anything, rather than just, me dictating the questions, anything you just think would be really useful to share with, with sort of the RevOps world.
Yeah, I think, especially in a enterprise SaaS environment, which is really what I've been working in the last couple of years, post Kemper, is, thinking about how customers buy, right? So it's different now than it was where, when I was selling Yellow Pages and there was literally one decision maker and you have that hardcore close where you stare them in the eye and nobody talks. And the first person who talks loses. That was super fun and exciting and, getting them to sign. And it's just not how it works now. So you're selling to 8, 9, 10 people in an organization. And sales and rev ops leaders tend to be very linear. So, if it's this stage, you have to do these things, and then it goes to that stage. I just stood up a new opportunity in Salesforce. There are only 3 open stages, and basically it goes from qualified to qualifying, or qualifying to qualified. That's a one-way street. Then there are 2 other stages. I really don't care what stage they're in, right? We have a number of tasks that, they should be completing, but they don't happen in order. People don't buy in order, right? So you have a CFO who wants to know something different than a CEO. And what do they care about? And the CEO maybe, yeah, I think it's a go. We're great. And then now all of a sudden you talk to the vice president of their legal team and they're like, whoa. You've got to start way back here. So I think sales ops leaders really need to stop thinking linear and think in terms of, and even not probabilities. Like, I really wish you could get rid of the probability field in Salesforce, but you can't hide it. They want it in there. I hide it from the view of all the reps and my CRO. And we don't use it. So it drives finance nuts a little bit, but what we use is our forecasting methodology. And then I have a CRO forecast that basically gives him the ability to let them have their autonomy to forecast, and we hold them to it at a certain point in the quarter. We hold them to their forecast. But he has the ability to say, yeah, I know they're saying that, and he can override it for his executive reports. So I think stop thinking that sales is linear, because it's not. Probabilities don't tell you, oh, we have a 50% close chance. That tells me nothing. You could have a new chief compliance officer jump in at the end and make you start due diligence over. And that brings you back a month, So you have to think of the sales process being a buying process. And how do we enable the team to get the people that they're working with on their end enabled to make buying decisions? Because it's a group effort. It's not nobody's going to fall on the sword for the decision. And, obviously we all know most deals lead to indecision, right? So it's not like necessarily that they're even going with a competitor. So I think just stop saying, things have to be linear. And if you don't go to this stage, then you can't get this. If somebody wants to send an MSA out early on, by all means do it. That's going to save you time later. I don't need to wait for you to be in closing stage to be able to get an MSA. So one of the tools I'm putting in place right now is Seismic, and we're going to push content to people as they need it. So when they are, saying, okay, I'm starting a proposal, then poof, the templates will pop up and they can just grab them and have it be there. So I'm trying to enable it so people can work through things like that. Less required fields and more tasks. Did you or didn't you do this? So we just stood that up September 1st. So go forward, I'm looking at, how do I then track progress, install deals and things like that? And it becomes a little tricky because it's not necessarily based on stage movement, but it could be they requested they downloaded a proposal template and now it's been 3 weeks and nothing's happened. So we're going to get creative in how we do build the reporting around it, so we can really track those sort of things. So as long as there's a field, you can report on it, and there's going to be a time date stamp in the background. And that's a concept that most sales ops leaders would probably, have get the heebie-jeebies over, but it's so great. And especially from a user perspective, it gives them some level of control and autonomy in what they're doing, and defining guidelines around forecasting. If you're saying it's committed and this is the close date and it's in quarter, we're taking that to the grave, right? And so that's really how we manage it.
Thank you. That was super interesting. I just want one quick extra question before I bring Tom back, just to follow up on that, which is, I guess I get everything you're saying, really helpful. It's almost like there are sort of more defined journeys for different stakeholders, but even those aren't going to be totally defined. And as you said, you don't know quite when they're going to come on, and therefore the whole thing should be more fluid. And then you talked a little bit about it in terms of commit. This quarter, you got to take it to the back. How do you handle sort of pipeline forecasting sort of further out, particularly around likelihood to close and date of close? If, as you said, you've recognised that the process is so hard to define, do you have any kind of key things you look at to help there?
So we do use all of the forecasting stages we've created, and we bucket them into qualified and qualifying. So if it's in quarter, everything should be qualified. Nothing should say qualifying. If it's, future quarters, there's going to be a mix. So we have, pipeline, whether it's, a 5X qualified, and we really look at a rolling 4 closely. So I have different views of my dashboards. Rolling 4 is going to be in quarter, current quarter, and rolling 4 are our two, dashboards that we look at very closely. And then we have the full pipe, which shows by quarter, throughout as far as it will go. So, some of the deals, were 4 months. I would say 6 to 24 months. We're going to be more in that, 6 to 12 month sales cycle, depending on the deal size and the product. So, rolling 4 for sure, in quarter for sure, and then just really looking at qualified versus not qualified. And, I'm looking at the numbers every day. So if I see something that pops out, I just, shoot them an email. Hey, why do you have this in quarter? And they're, it's not a lot for them to manage, in terms of what we're asking. We're asking, like, make sure for the purpose of reporting, you feel good about your close date, the ACV value, because that's what we're focused on this year, and your dollar amount, or your ACV value, and your forecast category. So those are going to be the most important things. Qualifying automatically comes out of any executive reporting. And then from there, we look within that for those commit, deals.
Amazing, super helpful. Thanks so much, Sandy. I'm just going to bring Tom back in just to wrap up for us.
Sandy, thank you so much. I can tell there was a lot of wisdom shared. It seems like it's been an amazing journey that you've been on, and the work that you're doing at Nymbus. I'm really excited to see how the sales process, or the sales function, the revenue function, grows with your oversight over the coming years. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.